Episode 5.
The Unspoken Manifesto. The Islamic worldview and Islam global agenda articulated in the communiqué issued at the end of Islam in Africa conference in 1989 at Abuja, Nigeria, highlighted the religious and political persuasions of every head of government and president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria of northern extraction since independence in 1960, except one. All are Muslims except one. Their allegiance is to the Islamic Ummah, Islamic global community or worldwide family of Muslims. Their loyalty has not been and may never be to the Federal Republic of Nigeria or its constitution, unless there is a sudden violent political upheaval or an indescribable providential fortune. For example, a presidential candidate from Adamawa State, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, former vice president of Nigeria, recently distanced himself from a tweet condemning the lynching of Deborah Samuel Yakubu, a Christian 200-level student of Shehu Shagari College of Education, Sokoto, who was stoned to death and burnt by fellow students for allegedly blaspheming Prophet Muhammad. What did she do? It was alleged she had insisted that her classmates use the WhatsApp group platform created to share assignments and tests for those purposes, and not be used to spread Islamic messages. In the ensuing back-and-forth argument, her utterance was said to have insulted Prophet Muhammad. Her accusers were also at the same time her prosecutors and judge, which was clearly against the grain of justice, fairness, and the Nigerian constitution. This was in May 2022. Apparently Atiku, who is running for president on the platform of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, took to Twitter to condemn the mob action, saying, "There cannot be a justification for such gruesome murder. Deborah Yakubu was murdered, and all those behind her death must be brought to justice. My condolences to her family and friends." But when he came under threats from some Muslim northerners who vowed not to vote for him if he emerges as the presidential candidate of PDP, he deleted the tweet. He went further on his Facebook-verified Hausa page to distance himself from the tweet. The scripture says, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other." Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. Enter President Muhammadu Buhari. However, not one of the previous governments has been as brazen as the present President Muhammadu Buhari's All Progressives Congress, or APC-led government. The government seems to be so certain of already having everything under control that it has laid aside the circumspection which until now had at least partially concealed the true intentions of other governments headed by northern Muslims. This is the reason most Nigerians like Bishop Matthew Kuka of Sokoto Catholic Diocese are of the opinion that President Buhari deliberately sacrificed the dreams of Nigerians of seeing a country evolve into an enduring union in diversity to what seemed like a program to stratify and institutionalize northern hegemony. Nigeria is a composite of northern and southern regions. While northern region is wedded to Islamic feudalistic system, southern region is a budding liberal democracy. So, that he is institutionalizing northern Muslim hegemony is more appropriate. In reckoning, this is precedent in every region of the world to achieving the goal of Islam. Just as in the days of Prophet Muhammad, the fundamentalist followers of Islam today are pursuing world conquest. One mistake many Nigerians, particularly in the South, make is the assumption that the country is already formed and settled as a secular state. But it is not the case. There is an ever-present quest to define the country, of course from the Fulani Jihad of 1804. Under the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended, Nigeria has no state religion. While some interpret this to mean that Nigeria is a secular state, others insist that the country is a multi-religious state. Secular state means that there is separation of religion, church or mosque, and the state. This is to prevent the country from sliding into a theocracy that could result in the violation of the religious rights of disadvantaged groups. On the other hand, multi-religious presupposes that the religious rights of citizens should be accommodated by the government to allow citizens to enjoy their full right to practice their faiths as guaranteed by the Constitution itself. It is on the basis of this that Muslim leaders brought Islamic traditions like pilgrimages, mosques and the wearing of religious toga into government businesses and schools. It has resulted in an unhealthy rivalry between the two major religions, Christianity and Islam. The government does not recognize other religions. Islam first entered Nigeria through Borno in the northeast in the 11th century. The dissemination was essentially a peaceful process through Muslim clerics and traders, until the Fulani Jihad of 1804 led by Usman Dan Fodio through Sokoto in the northwest. The subsequent defeat of the jihadists by the British colonialists in 1903 did not stop the spread of Islam. On the contrary, the British used the administrative structures of Islam in implementing their policy of indirect rule and recognized Islam as the official religion wherever Muslims were in power. Thus, Islam had a firm hold in the north. After independence, a new impetus to the spread of Islam was given by Sir Ahmadu Bello, the Premier of the northern region. Although his plan for the Islamization of Nigeria was brought to an abrupt end by the military coup of 1966, the succeeding decades have seen a continuing government policy favoring the dominance of Islam in the country. The recent APC contraption with the political miscalculation of those that foisted General Muhammadu Buhari on the country as a born-again Democrat has served to reenact that same quest. Buhari is now, apparently, out to define the country. Buhari's worldview. In a seminar of the newly established Supreme Council for Sharia in Nigeria at Kaduna in 2001, Major General Muhammadu Buhari, former Nigeria's head of state, was given an opportunity to choose between Nigeria's secularism and fundamentalist Islam, Islamism. This is what he said: "I will continue to show openly and inside me the total commitment to Sharia movement that is sweeping all over Nigeria." He then added that, God willing, we will not stop the agitation for total implementation of the Sharia in the country. He said, "It is a legal responsibility which God has given us, within the context of one Nigeria, to continue to uphold the practice of Sharia wholeheartedly." Doubling down at the 16th National Quranic Recitation in Gusau, Zamfara State, he called for Muslims to vote at the 2003 presidential elections only for someone who would defend and uphold the tenets of Islam. In fact, he told Muslims that they have every reason to thank Allah for restoring the Islamic Sharia under the dispensation, which he said was destroyed by British colonialists during their crusade in 1903 against the Sokoto Caliphate. Crusade? Nigeria's deep state. Until now, the workings of the Nigerian deep state have been masked by kitman according to Islamic jurisprudence. Professor Ryan Gingeras described the term deep state to generally refer to a kind of shadow or parallel system of government in which unofficial or publicly unacknowledged individuals play important roles in defining and implementing state policy. The deep state is believed to be a clandestine network entrenched inside the government and military, bureaucracy, intelligence agencies, and other privately vested interests. It supposedly controls state policy behind the scenes, while government functionaries and the democratically elected process and elected officials are merely figureheads. This behind-the-scenes control of the national and sub-national governments was briefly and clearly expressed by Dr. Hakim Baba Ahmed, Director of Publicity and Advocacy of Northern Elders Forum, or NEF, in the maiden Maitama Sule Leadership Lecture at Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, while reacting to the Southern Governors Forum's demand for power shift to the South in the interest of equity, justice and fairness in the 2023 presidential election. He said, "We will lead Nigeria the way we have led Nigeria before, whether we are president or vice president or whatever. We will lead Nigeria." Experience has shown that having a Southern president might not make any difference. Baba Ahmed confirmed exactly that in his impudent statement. He said on the very few times when the North did not have the president, it was still the captain of the ship. Or what else did he mean by, "We will lead Nigeria the way we have led Nigeria before. Whether we are president or vice president or whatever, we will lead Nigeria"? He added forcefully that a Southerner would be supported only if the person would serve the North's interest. For the avoidance of doubt, he said, "We inherited leadership of Nigeria, and being honest is not being stupid." That might be the Kaduna State Governor's family dining table story tweeted by Bashir El-Rufai at Bashir El-Rufai on September 9, 2022. The British colonial establishment placed the North at the peak of power in my dear country. For that, I'll always be indebted to the British Royal Crown and the method of indirect rule for my people and our dear monarchs. Rest in peace, Queen Elizabeth. The North that Dr. Hakim Baba Ahmed and his ilk are referring to does not include Christians and others who are not Muslims in the northern political power equation of Nigeria. He was clear in the follow-up interview on Channels TV after the lecture. He said, irrespective of party politics, the North has her own way of rallying in support of northern interests. By northern interest, he means Muslim North interest. This was brought to the fore immediately Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, a Muslim from the southwest, was elected APC presidential candidate for the 2023 election. The discomfort of APC northern leaders finally came to the open after many months of political chicanery, which culminated in the party chairman announcing Senate President Ahmed Lawan of Yobe State as the party consensus candidate, almost on the eve of the party convention. It was roundly rejected by Northern Governors Forum in their own enlightened self-interest and the party National Working Committee. Tinubu is a Muslim and ordinarily represents the Muslim divide in a country blighted by religious sentiments of Christianity versus Islam. Why then the insistence that yet another Muslim from the north should have to pair with him? The reason is simple. Tinubu does not represent the Muslim North. Put differently, the core northern Muslims do not believe that Tinubu represents them from a religious perspective, and that is what Governor El-Rufai and others are drawing attention to, defending the Muslim ticket. Wondering what could be the rationale, a senior advocate of Nigeria, SAN, Ibun Olo Adegbaruwa, posed a number of questions to the promoters. He asked, is it superiority of faith, enforcement of international conspiracies, a new form of jihad? Is it a matter of distrust for or supposed inferiority of Southwest Muslims? Is the Southwest Muslim not Muslim enough, or Northern Christian not Northern enough? Kaduna Mafia, Cabal, etc. From one administration to another, or military regime to military regime, the phenomenon has been described variously in Nigeria as Kaduna Mafia, Cabal, etc. Since independence, there has been a perpetual struggle of the democratic process with Nigeria's deep state. We can safely conclude how the latter has proven a particular obstacle to democracy and political democratization in the country. The democratic tenets are regarded by the fundamentalist Muslims as anti-Islam. That is, they are not according to Allah's law, which is Sharia. They are seen as imported precepts from infidel countries, UK and USA. Consequently, democracy or democratic processes, including rule of law, are undermined by every means possible, overtly or covertly, by the Nigeria Islamic hegemons. Incompatibility of. The incompatibility of the two worldviews, Christian and Islamic, in setting national agenda through their contentious relationship, therefore, is the underlying cause of the stagnation, if not retrogression, of Nigeria as a nation. It is a never-ending supremacy contest in an internal political war of attrition. There is no luxury of time to envision a future for Nigeria, as every government has an urgent pressing need for self-preservation and installation of a successor. The challenge of every developing political economy demands a responsive, responsible and sure-footed government, which has been lacking in Nigeria since its independence over 60 years ago. There has never been an agreement among the Nigerian political class or its elite on the appropriate model of governance. As to the direction of development of the structure and processes for rule of law, responsibility and accountability, inclusive society and stability. Dr. Chidi Amuta puts it differently. But Nigeria does not survive on ideals. We are a nation of contingency, expediency and compromises. The expediency of north-south power rotation has kept us going even under the worst autocracies. Apart from region, ethnicity and religion are other potent bases of shared identity. Until these are deliberately put in proper context in the political power equation, rather than playing ostrich game, Nigeria will stay marooned in a pipe dream of national development as in the last 60 years. Can two people walk together without agreeing on the direction? Amos chapter 3, verse 3. The term Kaduna Mafia was said to be coined and popularized by a journalist, Professor Mvandaga Jibo, while describing a group of northern aristocrats and government sympathizers who were predominantly Muslims residing or working in Kaduna, the political capital of the northern region, who were sufficiently threatened at the fall of the First Republic, the assassination of Ahmadu Bello and some northern political leaders, and rallied round in opposition to Nigeria's first military regime of General Agui Aronsi. Ever since Dr. Akin Osontokun argued that the group thrived on an elaborate network of power alliances among northern aristocrats, retired army generals, successful businessmen, and government sympathizers who favored the group's pro-northern and Islamic bent. The northern Nigeria originally included the Emirates of Sokoto Caliphate and parts of the former Bornu Empire. It is alleged the group supposedly achieved the most success during the military regime of General Olusegun Obasanjo from 1976 to 1979, when many of its members were appointed to key positions of power and used its alliance to obtain patronage and disperse favor to friends and associates. They manipulated the levers of political power for personal economic benefits and also in pursuit of northern political and administrative hegemony within the Nigerian Federation. By so doing, they subtly pushed some northern agenda to undo perceived southern advantages in the Federation at the independence. The most successful one was to write federal character principle into the Constitution. Up till then, due to educational advantage, Southerners occupied federal public ministries, departments, and agencies. But this was reversed within 2 short decades. Unfortunately, the improved administrative advantage has not served the indices of educational advancement and economic and developmental progression. It has only translated to a political sense of entitlement. Hence, bypassing the required standard of system and process, it established a path of low resistance through which an undue advantage compromised every aspect of governance. Nevertheless, the solution was found in the 1999 Constitution, which tries to make equal unequal yokes, amendment almost impossible and national development a mirage. It made Muslim Northern unbridled power an albatross on the Federation and its people. However, the attempt to enshrine a federal Sharia Court of Appeal in the Constitution failed. The Sharia Court of Appeal in northern Nigeria has been the most controversial court in Nigeria. The court was first established amidst much controversy by the colonial authorities on the eve of their departure in 1960. It exercises appellate and supervisory jurisdiction in civil matters involving questions of Islamic law. The court came to light again during the making of the 1979, 1989, and 1999 constitutions, respectively. The court is now a subject of fresh controversies following the revival of Islamic penal sanctions in some parts of northern Nigeria. Presently, a Constitution Alteration Bill 2021, which seeks to expand the jurisdictions of the Sharia Court of Appeal of the Federal Capital Territory, or FCT, and state Sharia Courts of Appeal to include presiding over criminal matters, is in the House of Representatives for debate. The Triumvirate of Aso Rock. This political interest group, though not structured, has endured. Described as cabal, it returned to prominence during the administration of President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, and later in 2015, at the inception of the first term of the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. His nephew, the octogenarian Malam Maman Daura, is regarded widely as the head of the powerful triumvirate of Buhari's administration cabal, while the general himself is the self-effacing big brother. Of the 3 men of the triumvirate, only one, Abba Kyari, the chief of staff of President Buhari, held an official position. The other 2, including Ismailia Issa Funtua, a businessman, were unofficial, private individuals wielding power in the Buhari's presidency. While shedding light on his relationship with Abba Kyari and Issa Funtua in a British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, Hausa service, Maman Daura acknowledged knowing them for over 40 years. Abba Kyari, a Muslim Kanuri, was his godson, widely considered to be the face of the cabal and most powerful person in the Buhari administration before his death, while Issa Funtua was his business partner and together co-owners of Funtua Textile Mills. Because Buhari was out of government for many years and did not update his knowledge in terms of development and events in and outside of the country, the nephew was the de facto president from day one. They manipulated the levers of political power beyond what has ever been seen or known before in Nigeria, for their advantage and in pursuit of whatever cause of their principle. These individuals wielded so much power to the extent that it was said by those in the know that there was nothing they could not do in the name of the presidency. The federal government ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs, were shared as fief among family members, either by birth or marriage, and President Buhari is the feudal lord in whose name all blessings flow. Familial allegiance or Dr. Junaid Mohammed, a frontline northern politician from Kano, was so nauseated by the audacious manner in which Buhari and the cabal in cahoots were supplanting governance, national political and economic policies by group and self-interests, that he gave a peep into their setup in an interview with the Guardian newspaper and reported by other media in February 2018. He alerted the nation to how they have positioned their sons, daughters, sons-in-law, nephews and nieces, treating the country as if it was conquered by them or their families. The Daily Post newspaper and Nairaland, an online media also quoting him, said, "Let me say straight away that whether one calls it a cabal or a mafia or power within the presidency under Buhari, whatever you say it is, and a lot worse. First, the most influential person in the presidency today is one Maman Daura, who, as you know, is a nephew of the president. His father was Buhari's elder brother. In addition, Maman Daura was the one who single-handedly brought up Abba Kayari, the chief of staff to the president. In fact, Abba Kayari knew Maman Daura more than he knew his own father. There are ministers who have been appointed not necessarily because they have the capacity or any qualifications, but because they are related to Buhari. One of them is the aviation minister, Hadi Sarika, his elder sister's son. He was a junior minister in charge of aviation in the Ministry of Transportation and later became minister heading the Ministry of Aviation. By the way, the ministry workers, in commemoration of 2021 Workers' Day, flayed their minister for alleged poor handling of the sector and failure to deliver on the promises made since inception of office in about 6 years. The minister rolled out plans to float a national carrier with a complement of airport concession, aircraft leasing company, and homegrown maintenance repair and overhaul (MRO) facility. The president of the National Union of Air Transport Employees, NUATE, Ben Nabu, speaking for the workers, said, "We have persistently pointed out the folly of a one-man show in the governance of the sector. As we all know, there have been no governing boards for all the agencies in aviation, and the CEOs being direct employees of the Minister of Aviation and the Minister being the chairman of the so-called interim boards, the affairs of the entire aviation industry has been contrived to be totally in the hands of one man, Hadi Sarika. All our protestations on the subject over the past years have fallen on deaf ears. That stakeholders in the industry have tolerated this circumstance for all of 6 years is incomprehensible. Moreover, such feudalistic mindset might have prompted Isa Bayero, an aide and relation to the Emir of Kano, Aminu Ado Bayero, to demand in a letter to the Director General of Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, or NCAA, Captain Musa Nuhu, punitive measures against a local carrier, Air Peace Airline, for refusing to delay a boarded flight for the monarch, considering it a flagrant show of disrespect to the revered Emir of Kano and the Kano people at large. The case of the National Carrier Project was one of such follies. Despite budgetary allocations for 3 years in a row, 2016, 2017 and 2018, it was certain that the federal government was not ready when Sarika, as Minister of State in July 2018, unveiled the new national carrier, Nigeria Air, alongside the logo at the London Farnborough International Air Show, United Kingdom. Only for him to announce the suspension of the project in September 2018, 2 months after unveiling the name and logo of the national carrier. The project started from one controversy to another. Firstly, the design of the logo was contracted to a company in Bahrain at an amount the Minister of Aviation put neither here nor there when there were top-notch branding and logo design companies in Nigeria. Many figures were flying in the air for consultancy, advisory and logo design. A few months to the end of President Muhammadu Buhari's second tenure, which will be in May 2023, the proposed national carrier seems still a mirage following many failed dates. After a long delay, the Minister of Aviation commenced the processes of birthing the national carrier. Based on the empirical evidence since the 2015 presidential campaign promise of floating a national carrier, it is difficult to accept that the project was not orchestrated to be cornered by vested interests. Finally, the preferred and only bidder was the Ethiopian airline ET consortium, which the minister said met the deadline on June 10, 2022. He added, "Few others attempted to submit, unfortunately, could not meet the deadline. Since we did not collect the bids, we are not in a position to say who they are." He announced ET emerged as core investor in the proposed Nigeria Air with 49% shareholding. Federal government would control 5% equity, while a consortium of MRS, SAHCO, and Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, NSIA, as local investors would have 46%. But NSIA vehemently denied having anything to do with the proposed national carrier, which further raised more suspicion and controversy. Within 24 hours, in the face of the embarrassment, Aviation Ministry made a U-turn and replaced NSIA with institutional investors. So the proposed national carrier will be owned by ET, MRS, SAHCO, and unnamed institutional investors. The Minister of Aviation has pursued single-mindedly the project that the experts said would cripple the industry, which has already been bedeviled by a multitude of existential threats. Members of the National Assembly, airline operators and aviation stakeholders questioned the rationale for the shareholding structure. Captain Roland Ayeyi, member of Airline Operators of Nigeria, AON, said it would amount to an act of sabotage to allow ET, wholly owned by the government of another country with a controlling stake, to manage the proposed airline, as it would not benefit Nigeria at the end of the day. According to industry stakeholders, the partnership would amount to handing over the domestic operation to ET. James Nwezi reported in This Day newspaper that Ethiopian Airlines approached Air Peace Airlines in 2019 for such partnership, which would give the airline access to Nigeria aviation market, do local flights and use the country as one of its takeoff points for international flights. But Alan Onyema, the CEO of Air Peace, was said to have rejected the deal, as the offers were retrogressive and unpatriotic. ET has such partnerships in 8 other countries in Africa. The Vision 2035 of ET was conceived in anticipation of the Single African Air Transport Market, SAATM, with the primary objective of dominating the market. The principal manager of Avero Capital Partners, Cindy Forster, noted that Nigeria gave the highest share capital, 49%, to ET, compared with 40 to 45% given by lesser economies like Togo, Côte d'Ivoire, Zambia, Malawi, Guinea, Mozambique, and DR Congo, in owning stakes of their national airlines. Yet Nigeria has the market that no one else has on the continent. There are many unanswered questions. This is not the first time the Buhari government would throw Nigeria under the bus. As military head of state, he did the same at Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in 1985 OAU Summit for Niger Republic. Further quoting Dr. Junaid Mohammed, there are several others. The personal assistant to Buhari himself is the son of Maman Daura, the State House Chief of Protocol, is also a son-in-law to Mamandawra because he is married to Mamandawra's daughter. The position should have been given to a senior ambassador. Next, the minister they unilaterally chose against the interest of the party and the wishes of Sokoto people happens to be the daughter of the younger sister of Mamandawra's wife. Both of them are daughters of deposed Sultan Dasuki. We have the aide-de-camp to Buhari himself, Colonel Abu Bakr. He is married to the granddaughter of one of Buhari's elder sisters. Do you know that the special assistant to the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria and the special assistant to the junior minister of petroleum resources are Mamandawra and Buhari's daughters respectively? Now, there is a young man called Sabiu Yusuf, nicknamed Tunde, probably because of the late General Tunde Idiagbon, who was Chief of Staff when General Buhari was head of state. He is another personal assistant to President Buhari. He is also a grandson of another sister of Buhari. This is enough to prove to you that this is shamelessly the worst form of nepotism in the history of government in Nigeria. In fact, in the history of governments in Africa. Let me make bold to assert that I have never seen any level of nepotism that has equaled or surpassed this in my entire life. I am now in my 67th year. Another thing I also want you to know is that Amina Zakari, who was and still is a national commissioner in the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, representing the entire 7 states in the Northwest, it is being claimed that Buhari knows nothing about her appointment before he became the president. It is a lie. When President Goodluck Jonathan was reorganizing INEC and he was bringing in Professor Atahiru Jega, he reached out to Buhari and asked him to nominate somebody from the Northwest so that that person would be a national commissioner. Of all the people in the Northwest, Buhari decided to nominate his own niece, the daughter of his elder sister, Amina Zakari. She has been there. When Jega left, Buhari was determined to make her the chairman. It was because of the massive backlash that he dropped the idea like a hot potato. As of today, that woman is a national commissioner, which means she is one of the principal members of the election umpire. The immediate younger brother to Amina Zakari is currently the Minister for Water Resources representing Jigawa State in the same Buhari government. If this is not nepotism, then I don't know what nepotism is. For somebody who had the brutal arrogance to appoint these relations, not bothered about public opinion, about the sense of justice, and about competence. Then Nigerians had to wait 6 months before Muhammadu Buhari constituted his government in 2015. Economic pundits partly blamed the delay for why Nigeria plunged into recession as soon as Buhari assumed power, with investors waiting for policy direction from the new president before deciding whether to hedge their bets on Nigeria or not. Inasmuch as there was no preparedness for governance on the part of the parties that merged to form the party All Progressive Congress, APC, it may be argued that President Buhari and his inner circle might have retained allegiance of familiar relationships as a fallback over and above all those democratic niceties and constitutional requirements. Furthermore, in the Arise News exclusive interview with President Buhari in June 2021, 2 years into his second term in office, the myth surrounding him for 6 years was thoroughly debunked. If there was anything the interview proved, it was that President Buhari knew full well everything happening in the country and his government. Gross nepotism? Many of the members of the cabal or the deep state were appointed to key positions of power and used its alliance to obtain patronage and disperse favor to friends and associates. For example, Ismailia Issa Funtua, who was the shadow superintendent of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, was said to be receiving a specified amount of US dollars in millions each week at a very ridiculously low rate and sold the same in the black market at the going rate. Since the inception of Buhari's administration, there have been several foreign exchange windows in the bank, which made planning difficult and unpredictable for both local and foreign investors. Yet the Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, who is notorious for always gaslighting, would insist that ease of doing business is one of the achievements of Buhari's government, not minding the number of businesses that have shut down or relocated to the neighbouring countries. The former central bank governor, His Royal Highness Lamidu Sanusi, alleged that the central bank was creating billionaires through forex subsidies. Funtua did not stop at forex round-tripping, a US-based journalist asserted with impeccable empirical evidences. According to the journalist, he, Funtua, forced the CBN to award his company a 30 billion naira contract for construction of the CBN car park extension. The entire contract violated the constitutional requirements as stipulated in the Procurement Act. Apart from this, there were the acquisitions of Keystone Bank and 9 mobile telecoms by Issa Funtua and family with CBN funding and loan guarantee. A few sources claim that the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, owes his position to keeping powerful forces like Issa Funtua very happy. Just as Central Bank of Nigeria was in Issa Funtua's corner, so was Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, was in the corner of Abba Kyari. Though Abba Kyari was the chief of staff to the president, yet he was appointed by President Buhari to the board of Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC. The board was chaired by junior minister as the president himself was the substantive minister of petroleum resources. The Minister of State in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Dr. Emmanuel Ibe Kachikwu, who was until his appointment the executive vice chairman of ExxonMobil, was strangely made simultaneously the chairman of the board and the group managing director of NNPC. He was, however, removed as GMD and replaced within a year by a group general manager of a subsidiary of NNPC, who made the board chairman cum Minister of State a lame duck. What a mischief! A Nation in Search of Vindication. Bishop Matthew Kuka. Bishop Matthew Kuka of Sokoto Catholic Diocese summarized all these in his 2020 Christmas message, A Nation in Search of Vindication. He said, "Every honest Nigerian knows that there is no way any non-Northern Muslim president could have done a fraction of what President Buhari has done by his nepotism and gotten away with it. In fact, there would have been a military coup a long time ago, or we would have been at war." He posited that the president may have concluded that Christians will do nothing and will live with these actions. Disconsolately, the bishop concluded, he, Buhari, may be right, and we Christians cannot feel sorry that we have no pool of violence to draw from or threaten our country. Muslim right concerns, MURIC, immediately jumped into the fray, castigating Bishop Kuka on behalf of President Buhari's APC-led government. The group's director, Professor Ishak Akintola, described Kuka's allegation of nepotism as unfounded and baseless, using some other indecorous adjectives to qualify him. Soon after, the apex Muslim organization in Nigeria, the Jama'atu Nasril Islam, JNI, took a swipe at the bishop's message, describing it as a poisoned arrow fired at the heart of Islam and Muslims in Nigeria. In a statement signed by the Secretary-General of JNI, Dr. Khalid Abubakar, reminded the bishop that Sokoto was the seat of the caliphate and the heart of Islam and Islamic scholarship, culture, and practices of sub-Saharan Africa, and jogged his memory of the liberality, congeniality, and the camaraderie extended to him in Sokoto and all over Muslim North, that by the message and similar inane attacks against Islam and the Muslims, the bishop has lost the friendship and the hospitality of the entire Muslim populace. The situation soon assumed a vicious dimension shortly after, when the Muslim Solidarity Forum, MSF, warned the bishop to quickly and quietly leave Sokoto if he failed to apologize. The acting chairman of Sokoto chapter of the forum, Professor Isa Maishanu, said the message of the cleric was a direct attack on Islam. He said Kuka's innuendos and parables in his speeches were against Islam and its adherents. However, Bishop Kuku rebutted the allegations and charged the JNI Secretary-General, Dr. Khalid Abu Bakr, of inciting violence against him. He also challenged the JNI to, as a matter of honor, show where he attacked Islam and Muslims in the message, adding that he would be more than happy to apologize for such. There was no response to his rebuttal. These threats to his life elicited reactions from Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, SMBLF, among others, all in support of the bishop's perspective of the state of the nation in his message. It was not that he was saying anything new. Others, like Dr. Junaid Mohammed, a frontline Muslim northern politician from Kano, and Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, a former president, had berated President Buhari of gross nepotism, cronyism, and insensitivity to insecurity in the nation. In a bid to douse the tensions, the presidency came out to chide the Islamic groups over their criticism and threats against the Catholic bishop, describing it as wrong and unconstitutional. That Nigeria's strength lies in its diversity, that the right for all religions to coexist is enshrined in the country's constitution. Nonetheless, there is a convergence of opinion across the regions and party lines as to Buhari's APC-led government raising the art of political doublespeak almost to a state policy. Furthermore, the course of policy of his government and the scheme of the Nigerian deep state in allowing extremist ideologies to flourish are the actual issues of concern. In an apparently inexplicable way, the good are held hostage by the wicked and by those who help them, either out of interest or fear. The Buhari APC government's Islamization agenda has been evidently misunderstood by most Christians, including the church leaders. In view of the population ratio of Muslims versus Christians, the idea is not to violently impose Islam in other parts of the country. It was never an outright religious war or imposition, but it has been a simple, innocuous political strategy. For instance, there was a backlash in the media in 2019 when newly sworn-in President Buhari jetted off in the evening of the day to Saudi Arabia for Organization of the Islamic Cooperation, OIC, 14th Summit, instead of broadcasting to his Nigeria constituency what his re-election has in store for its over 200 million citizens. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew chapter 6, verse 21. Conflicted national interest. There is conflicted Nigeria's national interest, caused primarily by the contending Islamic worldview versus Western democratic worldview, which is often interpreted as Judeo-Christian. This is the core reason there is no recognizable national consensus on anything. Hence, Nigeria is bereft of national ethos around which it can galvanize a genuine patriotic action. Take the example of the youth's protest of October 2020 against police brutality that was nicknamed #EndSARS. The #EndSARS was a decentralized social movement and a series of mass protests against police brutality in Nigeria. The slogan called for the disbanding of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, a notorious unit of the Nigerian police with a long record of abuses. Without any intervening time, motley crowds were seen in many northern state capitals carrying placards protesting against the #EndSARS protests, happening largely in the southern states. As soon as the protests against police brutality started, it took a north-south dichotomy in the country. The #EndSARS protests were largely in the southern states, except token showing in Kwara and Plateau states in the northern region. The protesters were ruthlessly dealt with at Abuja, the federal capital, by government security apparatus, employing hoodlums, thugs and vandals who destroyed properties and merchandise of businesses owned by identifiable Southerners, especially Southeasterners. Also, there were international demonstrations organized by Nigerians in diaspora in Europe, the Americas, Oceania, and elsewhere in Africa. The demonstrations were in democratic countries where there was respect for rule of law. What was therefore acclaimed to be, finally, Nigerian docile youths have found their voice, took a religious ethnic coloration with political undertone and resistance. There is no single activity in Nigeria involving power or money that is not tainted by accusations and counter-accusations. There is a perpetual mutual suspicion pitched along the two dominant religions. This reflects adversely on every aspect of national life and society. This is the national identity crisis that President Muhammadu Buhari has come to exacerbate with his single-mindedness in pursuit of Islamic hegemonic revival, which he believes was lost in 1903 to British colonists' crusade. With hindsight, the six parties that came together to found APC and valiantly campaigned for change, restructuring of governance and political economy, devolution of power and true federalism, bitterly disappointed the hopes of its voters. It became apparent that President Buhari abandoned the APC manifesto with its promises to Nigerians upon resuming office in 2015 for the Islamic agenda to take over the entire continent of Africa and Nigeria as the prized jewel. Going through the secret document of the founding of Islam in Africa organization at Abuja in 1989, resolution by resolution, line by line, it is evident there is a Buhari complete political volte-face, from his promise to embrace democracy and respect for rule of law to his pursuit of Islamic hegemony. Some resolutions of the communiqué were so horrifying that the stratagems were repudiated immediately it came to the open. It was an American Christian publishing ministry that exposed the Islamic conspiracy sometime in 1990 across Africa, alerting churches and Christian organizations. But it was denied then by the government of General Ibrahim Babangida. In fact, there was a further cover-up with a forged 1990 declaration, which was postured to be the communiqué issued at the end of Islam in Africa Conference of November 1989 at Abuja. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, nor hidden that will not be known. Luke chapter 12, verse 2. There are also widespread allegations of governments, both central and subnational, looking the other way many times when anti-democratic non-state actors undermine the system and imperil the lives and properties of other Nigerians. For example, in an apparent social-political control, Ansaru terrorist group took over large portions of Birnin Gwari local government area in Kaduna State. The chairman of Birnin Gwari Emirate Progressives Union, BEPU, Ishaq Usman Kasai, reported in national dailies that the group banned political activities in many communities such as Old Kuyelo, Unguwa, Makare, under Murray of Kozagi Ward. He gave an instance of a motorcycle rider who lives in one of the villages who was seen with a sticker of one of the candidates vying for the Kaduna State House of Assembly, and he was thoroughly beaten by the Ansaru terrorists. The last local government election did not hold in the area due to the escalating insecurity, which made the election results to be declared inconclusive, and a sole administrator was appointed to oversee the affairs of the local government. A number of people joined them out of fear and were taken to the forest for indoctrination. They were told to join the fight against the government and democracy in order to establish an Islamic state. While federal government is silent most times and Kaduna state government is usually ambivalent in its responses, apart from offering empty platitudes and threats, the people were regularly attacked, properties burnt, many villagers killed and scores kidnapped in Birnin Gwari local government. On the Owo massacre, Stephen Rash, a senior fellow at the Religious Freedom Institute, said, "These types of murders are taking place weekly, almost daily in Nigeria. Murders of innocent Christians being gunned down, slaughtered indiscriminately throughout the north and increasingly into the central part of Nigeria and into the south."
For years, Fulani herders in Benue State, neighboring Nasarawa and Plateau states, lived with the natives in different host communities. But in the last 8 years, these neighbors turned to enemies, with the emergence of President Buhari, who started talking about Ruga, grazing reserves and grazing routes. Since then, sporadic killings have become a constant in the country. The violence is often traced to issues ranging from fights between indigenes and settlers to clashes between farmers and Fulani herders over access to land. That today is the tragedy of the country. But on the occasion of the last Salah Day, on April the 21st, 2023, President Buhari said, "I got what I wanted and will quietly retire to my hometown while addressing guests. If they make any noise to disturb me in Dora, I will leave for the
Niger Republic.
Thank you for listening to episode 5 of Show the House to the House. You can now listen to episode 6 on the same channel.